What would you do if the one person you trusted most betrayed you? A loving wife and a devoted husband, until the truth came crashing down. What started as small lies quickly spiraled into an affair that no one saw coming. The deception was so deep, the pain so intense, that it left them both questioning everything. Stay with us till the end, because you won't believe the shocking twist in this story. This betrayal will change everything. Emily had always believed in the fairy tale. She and Alex had been high school sweethearts, and when they got married, she thought they would grow old together, just like in the stories. They had built a beautiful life, a cozy home, a dog, and a stable routine that made her feel like everything was exactly how it should be. They were a team, always had been, and Emily felt secure in their love. But somewhere, things had started to shift. Alex was no longer the attentive husband he had once been. He was distant, often coming home late from work, leaving early for meetings that she never really understood. At first, Emily chalked it up to stress. After all, Alex had been climbing the corporate ladder, and the demands of his job had intensified. She didn't want to complain. She wanted to support him, to be the understanding wife. But the nagging feeling in her gut refused to go away. She noticed the subtle changes at first. He stopped texting her throughout the day, something that used to be routine. The sweet, good morning texts had turned into one-word replies. He started staying late at work more often, saying it was just a busy period. But Emily knew him better than anyone else. This wasn't like him. He was a man of routine, and he never used to stay late without a reason. Yet, when she asked, he always had an explanation. "I'm working on a big project," or "it's a meeting that ran long." The excuses came easily, and Emily, wanting to believe him, accepted them. Things came to a head one evening when Emily found a receipt for a hotel room on the kitchen counter. It wasn't hers. Her heart sank as she picked it up and saw the date. It was from the night before, and Alex had never mentioned going anywhere. She tried to push the panic down, but the feeling of betrayal bubbled up to the surface. She confronted him that night, shaking as she held the receipt in her hand. "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex looked at her, his face pale. For a moment, there was silence, just the two of them staring at each other, the weight of her question hanging in the air. He didn't say anything for what felt like forever. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice shaky. "I... You stayed at a hotel last night, Alex? Without telling me? And you expect me to believe it's not what I think?" Emily's voice broke as she said the words. The tears that had been threatening to spill finally fell. "What's going on? Who are you lying to?" Alex stood there, his eyes shifting uncomfortably, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I'm sorry. I..." he started, but Emily wasn't having it. She had waited too long for him to be honest with her. She had trusted him, and now everything she thought she knew about their life together was unraveling. "Who is she?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. She knew now. She had known deep down, but hearing him admit it would make it real. She didn't want to hear the answer, but she needed to know. Alex's silence told her everything she needed to hear. He had been unfaithful. The man she had built her life with, the man she loved, had been lying to her. The betrayal was as deep as the love they had shared, and it felt like the ground had been ripped from under her feet. I'm so sorry, Emily," he whispered, his voice shaky. "I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened. I didn't know how to stop it." Emily's heart shattered. The man she had trusted more than anyone had betrayed her, and the worst part was that she had seen the signs but had refused to believe them. She had tried to rationalize his behavior, to make excuses for him. But now there was no denying the truth. The love she thought they had was a lie. She stood there, staring at him, unable to speak. The pain in her chest was suffocating. She had loved him with all her heart, and now she felt like a stranger in her own home. The life they had built together was no longer a fairy tale. It was a broken story that she didn't know how to fix. The silence in the house was unbearable. Emily stood there, staring at Alex, unsure of what to say or do. Her entire world had just been turned upside down in the span of a few minutes. The man she had trusted more than anyone had betrayed her in the worst way possible. She couldn't comprehend it, couldn't understand how it had happened. All the years of love, of promises, of laughter seemed meaningless now. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Alex said, his voice breaking. But Emily couldn't bring herself to respond. What was there left to say? He had already said enough. He had confirmed the betrayal, confirmed the affair. Her mind was a whirlwind. Thoughts and emotions were crashing into each other. She wanted to scream, to cry, to make him feel the pain that was now coursing through her veins, but she was too numb to do anything. The tears wouldn't stop, but they felt like they were coming from someone else. This wasn't the woman she used to be, the strong, trusting woman who had stood by Alex's side through thick and thin. No, this woman was someone else now, someone she didn't recognize. "I want you to leave," Emily finally whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. She didn't want to be cruel, but she couldn't stand the sight of him anymore. Not after everything. He had taken away her trust, her peace of mind, her happiness, and for what? A fleeting moment of excitement? A betrayal that had shattered everything she held dear? Alex looked like he had been slapped. His eyes widened and his lips parted as if he were about to speak, but no words came out. The guilt, the regret, the fear, they all played out on his face. But Emily didn't want to see it. She didn't want to hear it. She had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. "Please, Emily, just listen," he begged, stepping toward her. But she held up a hand to stop him. "No," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I don't need to hear your excuses, Alex. I don't need to hear that it just happened or that you didn't know what you were doing. You made a choice. You chose her. And now you need to leave. I can't look at you. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't love me enough to be honest." The words were painful to say, each one more excruciating than the last. But they were true. It was the truth she had been avoiding for so long, the truth she didn't want to admit. She couldn't be with him anymore. She couldn't be with someone who had betrayed her trust so completely. There was no going back from this. No going back to the way things were before. Alex didn't fight her. He didn't argue or beg her to forgive him. Instead, he just stood there, looking defeated, his eyes full of regret. He had no defense. He knew he had messed up beyond repair. The affair, the lies, the secrets, it had all built up to this moment. And now he was left with nothing but the consequences of his actions. "I'll go," he said quietly, his voice hollow. "But I'm sorry, Emily. I am so sorry for what I've done." But Emily wasn't listening anymore. She couldn't. She was too broken, too hurt. She needed him gone. She needed space to breathe, to think, to figure out who she was now that everything she knew had been ripped apart. She needed to heal, even if that meant doing it alone. As Alex turned to leave, Emily collapsed onto the couch, her body shaking with the weight of everything that had just happened. The tears flowed freely now, but they weren't just for the loss of her marriage. They were for the loss of herself, the woman who had trusted, who had believed in love, who had been blind to the cracks in their relationship. She had given so much, and now she was left with nothing. The emptiness inside her was overwhelming, and she didn't know how to fill it. She had always thought that love would fix everything, that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. But now she realized how naive that belief had been. Love couldn't fix this. Not this kind of betrayal. For hours, Emily sat in the silence of their home, feeling the weight of her decision. The anger had faded, replaced by a deep sorrow that consumed her. She couldn't understand why Alex had done this, why he had chosen another woman over her. It didn't make sense. But she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't let him back in. She couldn't allow herself to be trapped in this cycle of lies and deceit. She had to be strong. She had to find a way to move forward. And that night, as she finally fell asleep, she made a promise to herself. She would heal. She would rebuild her life, piece by piece, even if it meant doing it without Alex. It would be hard, it would take time, but she would find a way to move on. The days that followed were long and painful. Emily knew she had made the right decision in asking Alex to leave, but the loneliness that settled into her heart was unbearable. Her home, once a place of comfort and warmth, now felt empty. Every corner seemed to whisper reminders of the life she had built with him, the moments they had shared that now seemed like distant memories. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of things that no longer held meaning. At first, Emily tried to distract herself. She spent time with her friends, though she didn't really feel like being around anyone. They encouraged her to get out, to go for walks, to take care of herself, but nothing seemed to ease the emptiness inside. She couldn't stop thinking about everything: the affair, the lies, the way Alex had looked at her when she confronted him. The confusion and hurt flooded back every time she tried to relax, every time she allowed herself to think about what had happened. But even as she struggled, she found strength in unexpected places. She began to realize that while the pain of the betrayal was deep, it wasn't permanent. It would take time to heal, but she was capable of healing. She was capable of finding her own strength, something she hadn't fully understood until now. She had been so focused on building her life with Alex, on making their relationship work, that she had forgotten about herself. But now she had to rediscover who she was without him. One afternoon, after a long day at work, Emily decided to go for a walk. The air was crisp, the sun beginning to set, casting a warm glow over everything. As she walked, her thoughts slowed, and she began to feel the first glimmer of peace in days. The tension in her shoulders eased, and for the first time since Alex had left, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know where her life was headed, but in that moment, she realized something important. She was okay. She would be okay. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to take small steps toward rebuilding her life. She signed up for a yoga class, something she had always wanted to try but had never made time for. The first class was difficult. Her body felt stiff, and her mind kept drifting back to the pain, to the anger. But with each breath, she started to feel more grounded. She began to focus on her own well-being, taking care of herself in ways she hadn't before. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened or erasing the pain. It was about learning to live with it, to live through it. She also returned to her hobbies, the ones she had put aside while she was in the relationship. She started painting again, finding solace in the quiet act of creating. The brushstrokes gave her a sense of control, a sense of expression she hadn't known she had been missing. It wasn't a cure, but it was a release. Slowly, she started to feel like herself again. But there were moments when the loneliness hit harder than she expected. At night, when the house was quiet and everything settled into stillness, the empty space beside her in bed seemed to echo with the absence of what she once had. She couldn't help but think of the life she had lost, the trust she had given, and the way everything had fallen apart so quickly. And then there were moments when she wondered if she would ever trust again. Would she ever open her heart to someone else, knowing the pain that betrayal could cause? The fear of being hurt again was real, and it held her back from moving forward in ways she couldn't fully explain. But with each day, the fear grew a little smaller. She realized that healing wasn't just about moving on, it was about learning to trust herself again. It was about giving herself permission to be vulnerable, to let go of the hurt, and to know that, even if she were hurt again, she could survive it. Emily didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she would find love again, or if she would stay single for the rest of her life. But she did know one thing: she would never settle for anything less than the respect and love she deserved. She had learned the hard way that love, real love, wasn't about staying in a relationship just because it was familiar or comfortable. It was about trust, honesty, and mutual respect. And she wouldn't settle for less, not ever again. Over time, the sadness began to fade, replaced by a quiet strength. Emily had come to understand that her worth wasn't tied to Alex or anyone else. She was worthy of love, of happiness, of a future that was completely her own. And though the journey ahead wasn't clear, she knew that, whatever came next, she would be ready. She had been through the worst of it. She had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and the devastation of losing someone she had trusted. But now she was starting to heal. And that, in itself, was enough. The months passed, and Emily found herself changing in ways she hadn't expected. At first, the days felt long and exhausting, the memories of her marriage and the betrayal weighing heavily on her. But gradually, something shifted. She realized that she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to thrive. The pain, though still present at times, wasn't consuming her anymore. She was starting to reclaim her life, piece by piece. She found a new sense of purpose in her work. With the weight of her broken marriage lifting, Emily could finally focus on her career and her passions. She took on new challenges at the office and received praise for her hard work and dedication. She was thriving in a way she hadn't in years. It wasn't just about the recognition. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of so much more than she had realized. And then, something unexpected happened. She met someone new. It wasn't love at first sight, but there was a connection. His name was Mark, and he was a colleague she had worked with on a few projects. He was kind, considerate, and had a way of making her laugh that made her feel lighthearted again. He wasn't like Alex. He wasn't perfect, but he didn't need to be. Emily found herself enjoying his company, appreciating the way he treated her with respect and care. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe around someone. She didn't have to worry about secrets or lies, and that was a refreshing change. Mark didn't push her. He understood that she had been through a lot, and he didn't expect anything from her. They spent time together, going out for coffee, attending work events, and having casual conversations. And with each interaction, Emily realized how much she had grown. She was no longer the woman who was afraid to trust. She wasn't ready to jump into another relationship, but she was open to the possibility. She realized that, while she would never forget the pain of her past, she didn't have to let it define her future. There were still moments of doubt. Sometimes, when she looked at Mark, a small voice in her head would ask if she was ready to love again. The fear of being hurt, of being betrayed once more, was still there. But with Mark, it wasn't about rushing into anything. It was about taking things slowly, about rebuilding trust and learning how to be vulnerable again. Emily realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning from it, growing through it, and moving forward with a sense of purpose. She also spent more time with her friends and family, people who had supported her throughout her darkest days. She surrounded herself with love, and in doing so, she began to feel whole again. She no longer felt defined by her broken marriage or the betrayal she had suffered. She was Emily, a strong, capable woman who had weathered the storm and come out the other side with a renewed sense of self. One evening, while sitting with her sister at a local cafe, Emily had an epiphany. She had spent so much of her life thinking that her happiness was tied to someone else. Alex, her marriage, the life they had built together. But now she understood that happiness wasn't something to be found in another person. It was something that came from within. She could be happy on her own. She didn't need someone else to complete her. She was already complete. With this newfound clarity, Emily realized that she didn't need to make any decisions about her future with Mark right away. She didn't need to rush into another relationship or make any promises. What she needed was to continue focusing on herself, on her growth, on her healing. She had learned to be strong and independent, and now she needed to embrace that fully. The pain of the past would always be a part of her story, but it no longer controlled her. It was simply a chapter, one that had taught her invaluable lessons about love, trust, and resilience. And as she moved forward, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't defined by the man who had betrayed her. She was defined by her ability to rise above the pain, to rebuild, and to embrace the future with hope and determination. Emily was ready for whatever came next. She had learned that she was strong enough to face anything, whether it was love, heartbreak, or a new chapter in her life. She was ready to live on her terms, and that was more than enough. As Emily settled into this new chapter of her life, she found herself becoming more and more comfortable in her own skin. The walls that had been built around her after Alex's betrayal were slowly coming down, piece by piece. She wasn't the same woman she had been before. She was stronger, more self-aware, and more independent. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when the old wounds would surface, but she had learned how to handle them. One evening, as she was sitting alone in her apartment, she realized how far she had come. She had spent so much time focused on her marriage, on Alex, and on their future together, that she had lost sight of the one person she needed to care about the most, herself. But now that had changed. She had rediscovered her passions, her goals, and the woman she had been before she met Alex. She wasn't just the wife or the partner. She was Emily, an individual with her own dreams and desires. Her relationship with Mark continued to evolve, but she was careful not to rush it. She valued the time they spent together, and though the chemistry between them was undeniable, Emily wasn't ready to jump into anything too quickly. She had learned to take her time, to trust her instincts, and to focus on building a healthy foundation. What she had with Mark wasn't about filling the emptiness left by Alex's betrayal. It was about exploring a connection, seeing where it went, and enjoying each other's company without the pressure of expectations. Despite her growing connection with Mark, Emily remained cautious. She hadn't forgotten the hurt that had come with Alex's betrayal, and she knew that she couldn't simply erase the past. But Mark wasn't trying to replace Alex. He wasn't trying to rush things or push her into something she wasn't ready for. He respected her boundaries and gave her the space she needed. And that meant everything to Emily. As the weeks went by, Emily started to feel more in control of her life. She made time for herself, for her career, for her friends, and for the things that brought her joy. The confidence she had once lost began to return. She had realized that she didn't need a partner to feel whole. She had always been enough on her own, but it had taken heartbreak to remind her of that truth. One weekend, Emily decided to take a trip on her own. She had been feeling the urge to get away, to explore, to do something for herself. So she booked a solo weekend getaway to a nearby beach town, a place she had always wanted to visit but never had the chance. As she walked along the beach, the cool ocean breeze brushing against her face, she couldn't help but smile. The solitude was refreshing. She didn't need anyone to complete her. She was already whole. During her trip, Emily had time to reflect on everything that had happened. The pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal, but also the growth, the healing, and the lessons she had learned. She had walked through the storm and come out stronger. She had learned that love was important, but it had to start with loving herself first. She couldn't give someone else all of her if she didn't first give herself the love and respect she deserved. By the time she returned home, Emily felt lighter, freer. The weight of her past didn't hang over her like it once had. She had accepted the pain, but she had also chosen to let it go. It was a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She was ready to move forward, whether that meant continuing her journey with Mark, exploring new opportunities, or simply continuing to grow on her own. She didn't need anyone to validate her worth. She had already done that for herself. Back home, Emily received a message from Alex. It had been weeks since they last spoke. She hadn't expected to hear from him, but the message was simple. I hope you're doing well. I'm sorry for everything. For a moment, Emily just stared at the message, unsure of how to respond. The anger she had once felt towards him had softened. She no longer felt the need to confront him or ask for answers. She had already done the hard work of letting go, of forgiving, not for him, but for herself. So, after a moment of reflection, Emily replied with a brief message. I'm moving forward, Alex. I hope you do too. That was all she needed to say. She didn't need to keep him in her life, but she had found peace in the way she had handled everything. Emily had taken back her power, and with that power came freedom. Her life was no longer defined by her marriage to Alex or by the pain he had caused. She had stepped into her own light, ready for whatever came next. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she was no longer afraid. She had learned that she was strong enough to face whatever life threw her way. And as she closed her eyes that night, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The future was wide open, and she was ready to walk forward with her head held high, knowing that she was enough.